Hey, and welcome back. Today I'm going to go through why use BPMN in development. Taking advantage of a workflow approach for business and development. Um, I'm just going to go straight into this. First of all, why is workflow so important? Right now, when people are building software and building out their processes, they're using many different tools. So we're not connecting the business side, the development side, and the marketing side. All these tools have their own workflow, and that is good. That is good. But one of the problems which is happening is you're fragmenting your workflow across many different tools. Another issue is the overhead of learning and reteaching process, especially to sales. So one thing that a workflow approach is about pushing the structure, the order in which things happen. And that means if the workflow is changing over time, you're not going back and reteaching people what the new processes are, because the workflow is dictating how people interact, how people are supposed to perform within a system. Another big issue is inability to control, refine, and measure workflow processes. Of course it can be done, but when you encapsulate workflow in code and in certain rules and other aspects, being able to actually measure and know where to refine that process and actually have control over that whole process is very complex. It's highly fragmented. You have many players or people involved in measuring and refining, and that is a big issue. It's very similar to the fragmentation issue, but having a central control ability to handle these continual refinements is obviously critical. And another really big problem is that without a workflow orientated process, you're now putting the control of the workflow with the IT side or with the salespeople side. You're not telling them what things need to be done, how things need to be done. You're giving them the control to basically create their own workflows. And that goes for all aspects. As I said, I use IT and salespeople here as an example, because if you just give them a CRM, if you give IT people the ability to code, you're basically hiding the workflow within these little modules, and these people are going to implement it the way it is. They're not necessarily going to understand how the context works in terms of the business, and they should be blind to other areas of the system. So you as the owner or the business being in control of the workflow needs the power to be in control of all aspects. So let's talk about a workflow approach to business and IT. I'm always going to be talking about these subjects. So one thing is being the architect of your business. Okay, so what does that mean? Controlling your business from a workflow. So you have your business, and what I see is very high level companies, strong performing companies, they're controlling because they understand how their business works. They are architecting their business, so how information flows, what people should be doing, how they should be interacting, rather than just letting people work based on their own control flows. So being in control of how everything interacts and how the information interacts is critical to controlling your business, and most of all, being the architect of your business. So business design and workflow. So what I'm saying here is that you as a business are controlling the workflow. You're saying when things happen. You're saying the sequence. You're saying when things are parallel. You're saying how things interact. And your IT or your development, it should be responding to that. They should be building the functionality you need to achieve your workflow, rather than controlling how the business workflow should operate. So first of all, as I said, you control your business with a workflow. Second stage, you're designing this workflow and ensuring that the IT supports that workflow and is not the workflow. You're making people follow a process. So not learning a process so they can focus on what they do best. So what do I mean? It's like, if I am a underwriter, if I'm a salesperson, if I'm an accountant, you know, do you want me doing what I do best? Do you want me to be just underwriting? Do you want me just to be doing the accounting? Or do you want me to be taking documents from someone else and knowing, okay, once I finish my part, I need to go find Joe Blow over there, or XYZ, and I need to pass this on, you know? Learning a process and being involved in that process can be very difficult and time consuming. A lot of human errors happen. So people are professionals in what you hire them for, but doesn't mean you should be trying to get them to do all this other interaction that's outside their scope. So getting people to follow a process, especially when things are not their job, is key. You know, it's very key to a workflow or process. So for an example, working with a lot of salespeople, the salespeople, given too much freedom, will basically do whatever they want. Now, that's not okay. You know, they sometimes think they're doing the best for the company, trying to make a sales, but their interest is not necessarily the same as the company's interest. Their interest is to make the sale. If you have a risk department, their interest is almost in opposition. So we need a process to ensure that these people just focus on their area, and they're not changing the process or manipulating the process to ensure that, you know, it's meeting the company goals. Maybe they believe they're doing the best for the company, but they're wasting time, they're wasting resources trying to get around or modify a flow that you've tried to put in place. Also, they have to learn that process, and when you change it, trying to communicate effectively, changing that process is very difficult. And workflows need to change, update, improve without affecting people and resources. So a workflow approach to business and IT, this is really meaning that, you know, you start with the workflow, you see how it executes, you see the interactions, and now as things change, as your business changes, as the politics change, as the sales environment changes, you can update the workflow without going back and telling everyone that things have changed. So for example, there might be a process where, you know, I'm going to give a underwriting and insurance example. You know, the salespeople, they may collect documents, and then the documents, they get them and they put them into some system. Then they'll pass that on to the underwriter. So maybe you decide to change this process, and now the salespeople don't collect the documents anymore. It's an automated system that's going to email the people until the salespeople, once the documents are fetched. This now is a change process. So with a non-workflow approach, you have to go back to the salespeople or the underwriter, and you have to inform them this process has changed. Please do not collect this document. Do not use this. Do not do that. But with a workflow approach, you're basically driving the instructions. You're telling them what to do and when to do it. So they don't need to think about this process. So as a business, you can update, optimize, and change your workflow, and all the salespeople is being told is, okay, this is the next stage that you need to do. Sure, they might need to be informed, but they don't need to learn as much, and they don't need to be impacted by that change. So this is very, very important. If you have a business where you want to be changing, optimizing, and tweaking this workflow, your human workflow, your system workflow all the time, it's very important that you're architecting this and you're driving it from your workflow. So where to start with workflow? You know, this is just some approach that I've used. So first is modeling your workflow of your MVP. So here I'm talking about a new product or something like that. So first of all, you know, we're modeling how information will flow through the system. And this is not just system as in IT systems, this is the human system. So how all these interactions could work. Second is modeling your data structures and entities like you would normally. Third is creating a list of core functionality. So as I discussed before, we want the workflow to be the driver of how functionality is. So, I'll give you an example. I don't code a sequence. I don't say send this message, and then if this message was received, wait 7 days, then send the next message. No, at this point we control that with a workflow, and we get the developers just to write a single functionality. For example, send an email, send an SMS, send this, send that. So we want the developers to focus on a list of functionality. So workflow to broken down list of functionality. And functionality is normally something that represents a single activity. As I said, send an SMS, send an email, send something like that. So it can come down to that situation. Simulate your product and how it will work. So this is great. Now you have the workflow. You can act as the customer. You can act as the salesperson, the underwriting, the technical person, whoever else is involved, or even the processes themselves. And you can go through the whole scenarios. And you can break the scenarios down and say, okay, what if this customer, what if, to see if that's actually going to work, if the workflows are going to be executed correctly or processed in the right way. Obviously at this point, create and deploy your workflow. As I said, this is an MVP. You probably want to think about, minimizing certain functionality like you would in any development process, and trying to keep that as lean as possible. Test your product and workflow and expand on its needs. So this is something obviously you would do with any application. You're executing your workflows, you're going through your models, and then you see that you have gaps or you need to improve something. So yes, now you need to get back to refining and getting that feedback that you need. So what I do in terms of dual approach to developing workflows. So there is different ways to do things. So develop a future workflow. So in many companies I work for, there's not the resources, there's not the time to implement everything that I dream of, the exceptions, the processes, how sweet certain actions would be. So first, I can build a future workflow. This is my vision, my dream. So I'd like to get everything set up, how this would work, how workflows call other workflows, events, and everything. So this will become like a foundation of the roadmap of what I want to achieve. So develop a current workflow. So this is I take that future workflow, and basically anywhere I have certain automation or certain ideas or processes, now I'm going to replace them back with human tasks, because I know the human task can be executed and the human task will be a substitute. So I give you an example. If we're talking about the insurance or funding or something like that, we might have a series of steps in the underwriting. The underwriter might evaluate information, they might need to do certain background checks, everything like that. Now in the beginning, you might not have the technology or the resources to be able to automate this, but you know that in the future you will be able to. So in this case, we're taking a future roadmap, identifying this complex functionality which we'd like to have, but we're actually going to take it out and put a human task in there. So now this is a human resource based activity, or we're going to simplify it so that we can get to our goal quickly, so we can get to what we need to achieve. So we can't do everything in day one. Things need to be broken down into smaller parts. So and my last point here is evolve and publish workflow as new functionality becomes available. So we have our map of functionality, we've got the current task where we don't have functionality that can be met today, but as we meet that functionality, we just modify our workflows, we upgrade, and then we deploy again. So I'm going to give you a walkthrough of a onboarding example. So this is a fairly simple workflow in many ways, but this is only for discussion. So, we're going to go through this. So first, we're going to say we have a sign up. So this is a sign up from a customer. Boom. This event happens. Now we're saying we have a process. Background check of the customer. Okay, cool. Now we have the software is going to go off. It's going to do this background check, and it's going to come back. And it's going to say this is performed, and we're going to move on. So now we're going to model and do a value check. So quite often in many sales cycles, you're going to classify your customer. Is it a high value? Is it a medium value? Or is it a low value? So, what do we do when it's a high value? What is this process? And what is the other processes when it's not? So in this case, we got the example. Okay, boom, it's a high value. It's going to be assigned to the top salesperson. Why is it high value? We've done the background checks. We performed a value model of some kind that says, okay, they're working for a big corporation that's earning X amount of money. It fits our problem domain. Okay, boom, it's high value. Or medium or low value. So medium value, we're going to assign it to a normal salesperson or a mid-tier salesperson. Low value, okay, cool. So notify a salesperson in this case, and we're just going to move on the process automatically. So here let's go back to the top level guy. We're going to split off two actions. Boom. We've assigned it to whoever our high level person is. We're going to send them an introduction email. Boom. We're not going to waste time. That's going to go straight out the door. The second thing in parallel that's going to happen is we're going to create a human task to do a call with customer with the introduction. So this is going to have some instruction of how to call and the information associated with it. So there's a few things that I've put here. So first is I've put an alarm. Hey, this is a high value customer. The call has not happened yet and it's been 2 hours. Okay, notify the VP of sales that this has not happened. So every 2 hours this hasn't happened. We're going to keep sending an email to the VP of sales because whoever it's assigned to is not getting their work done. Maybe they're out on holidays, they've gone for a long lunch, or whatever reason. So the VP of sales needs to be informed so they can make a decision what action should occur. Alright, so 2 days have passed and this task is still not completed. So in this case, we're going to reassign this task to the VP of sales to do a call with the customer. So, it doesn't just wait with this guy. Okay, the sales guy, he's got this task, it's on his board. Shit, 2 days has passed. Okay, has to move on. This is a high valuable customer. We can't wait more than 2 days. So then we move on to the VP of sales. He does his call. They do a fact finding. So either route of fact finding, whether it's with this high value sales guy or the VP of sales guy, do this fact finding and it moves on. So at this point we're getting information from that fact finding and we can make another decision. Are they a premium version or a standard version customer? So at this point we're going to move on. We're going to organize a meeting for premium version. We're going to bring in the pre-sales guy. We're going to bring in someone else. If it looks like a standard value, okay, we're going to assign it just for a follow-up with maybe a couple of people or whatever that involves. So this is just, as I said, it's a conceptual model to understand how this can work, and it's going to be different for every company and how they perceive this. Now if we go back down to the medium value and low value, here we just send off an email quickly, and now we take a first application, and here we have larger delays, 14 days. Okay, we're doing a value here. We're waiting for them to fill in an application. If nothing happens, then after 14 days it moves on to a human to take it over. And after 2 days, we just send a follow-up email to that customer if we're following this route. For other ones, we're just going to do something similar. So you can see here we got, just from a very basic level of a workflow, we have some very cool things here. We have the mixture of software, the mixture of the human processes. We have parallel tasks, so things like sending emails, and salespeople are doing multiple actions at the same time, so the system is not waiting. And we also have things like escalation. Now, escalation is an awesome, powerful tool. In this 2-hour waiting, and boom, send the VP of sales an email. Boom, send us VP sales an email. So they know what's going on. They can, now the sales guy's accountable. Boom, two days have passed. Okay, whatever the sales guy's doing, he's not delivering. Now I am the VP of sales, I need to get involved, or whatever the escalation process is. So, very often, for whatever reason, salespeople or whoever might get stuck because they're not getting along well with the customer, because they don't understand the customer. Just maybe the personality doesn't meet. So we need this way of escalating. The same can go with IT. So it's IT support. We have problems, we can't solve it, it's been 20 minutes, an hour on the phone. Okay, now time to escalate this, or bring in another person, so it can keep on compounding the number of people working on this project. So, and once certain things are done, it can move on to the next stage of the process. So this is a very simple example, but you can see here that all the thinking is done by the business. We're driving how the information needs to flow through. We're driving how the functionality should work. And the beauty of this being a BPMN model is that this is executable. So this diagram is the diagram that is being executed, which means that the tasks are assigned from here, that the processes are executed from here, the timers are executed in this diagram. Which means if you decide that the 2-hour wait is too long, it needs to be 1 hour, okay, this can now be adjusted directly from this system, the workflow BPMN, and adjusted, updated, and boom, all future onboarding deals are now going to follow that methodology. So now that could mean, a large amount of money, or it could mean, much better ROI or conversion rates or whatever it is. This now can be your way. Or you might say, well, something's wrong with my customers and something's wrong with the sales relationship. Once again, okay, something is wrong. Okay, so I need to shorten these times for a period of time. No problem. You adjust your workflow, you deploy it, you experiment with it. Okay, now I'm seeing what's happening. We fix this problem. Okay, let's bring it back up to 2 hours, whatever. But now you're in control of the whole flow. And your salespeople don't need to know the order of things. With this workflow, as I said earlier, you're telling them what to do. So you're saying, okay, salesperson, at this point, you need to do an introduction call. Okay, salesperson, you need to organize a meeting with multiple people now. So instead of just getting them to think, okay, I just had that introduction, I put in my facts, now the system's going to tell me what I need to do next, which is organize a meeting with multiple people, or I just need to schedule up a call. So this is the business making the decision about which way and what actions need to occur. So you can keep refining that process over and over again. All right, so let's talk about the perspective of IT. So what does IT care about in this application? They care about events. So using workflow means what events need to occur. Of course, this is just a high-level view, but we're talking about, okay, an application comes in. So this is an event. The first interaction may be an event. They might call in on the telephone, which will need to trigger some event as well. So maybe this life cycle here, we talk about an application, but maybe it's a call in from a phone. So we need to think about those events, and if those events are going to start the same workflow or different workflows or join together. The other part is they need to think about the functionality. And as I said, from here, we try to break the functionality down to basically like a service or a single API, or it's autonomous activity that works together. Of course, it needs to use the data, but we need to fire it off at specific points of time. So we have a representation. In this case, we see the application comes in, and our functionality is assigned to user, background check, email, and this will keep on going on and on and on. So that is awesome. You really narrow down what you want your IT guys to do or development guys to do, and you break it down to single components. But what IT doesn't need to care about, what they don't need to waste their time about, is the order of process. So in many times, changing the order of process in software is a lot more complicated than you think. Adding a simple timer, changing the sequence of events, controlling the states, saving the states, all this information is very time consuming in development, and it's quite overlooked. I've seen a lot of code and it's like, well, if this, then this, if this, then this, and then they got all these temporary tables, and this state, and then need to save this state and this sequence. This is messy, this is complicated, and IT can really get bogged down by doing little things. So, as a business person, you can get frustrated. It's like, okay, I want this email to be sent out instead of 2 hours, I want this to be 1 hour. And you think, okay, that should be very easy to do. And generally it is. But it can be dependent on other things. So something you might not understand, maybe something is happening in the background. It could be difficult. Or when you change it and said, okay, I want this email to be sent before this other email. Okay, now you're talking about the states and the flows. So going back into the history, adding extra states and every additional information is complex by IT. But using this workflow perspective, you're cutting this out of your IT team's hand or your developer's hand. They get more time to focus on building these core functionalities and less time wasted on how things interact and what things get executed when, and orders and things like that, which really adds up to a lot. And let's go into the sales guys. What do they not need to worry about? Order of the process. Once again, as I said, you as the architect of the workflow is deciding what order things get executed in. And the workflow has so much flexibility that you can really power that order. You do the thinking about the customers, the order, and the sequence. And they also don't need to know what needs to happen next. So as I said, working in funding and things like this, one big issue is when the sales guys have to start sending information to underwriters and getting that information back and this and that. But the workflow will control that for you. So once the sales guys say, okay, I finished my part, I've collected my documents, boom, completed. Okay, now this information goes off. They don't need to know where. They don't need to know to go to the underwriter or a risk assessment or whatever departments or people you have involved in this process. It just becomes blind to them. And this is great because now they need to know maybe some updates and statuses and things like that, but they don't need to know who it went to or who it goes next or who it goes to next. So, that's something that's really, really important, is that they're not needing to know and always learning about these processes. They're just responding to what is coming up. What do I need to do next? What is my to-do list? Who do I need to call? What type of call is it? What do I need to organize? These sales activities are way more important than screwing around knowing, did I send that email? Was that information sent? Blah, blah, blah. Is it being followed up or not? No, you're letting the workflow control and dictate how that occurs. So, from the business perspective, now you're in control of the workflow. So you're driving this workflow, you're driving how information flows to your system. From the IT perspective, you're talking about a list of capabilities. So now your IT guys don't need to worry too much about what things happen in what order, but they need to build core functionality to service this workflow, i.e. evaluation models, send an email, background check. So information gathering, calling other APIs, performing intellectual decisions like AI decisions or very specific models, and then using these functionalities based off a core data model. So this is reading back and from a database, of course, or an information source, but it's being driven by single activities. It's more encapsulated. So your IT or your development get to spend a lot more time building stronger functionality, and you as the business get to choose from these capabilities. What capabilities can I have in my workflow? So here's some final words. Business workflow is your business. Well, definitely from me, business workflow it's how the information flows through the business. It's how people interact. Modeling gives you a deep understanding of what your business is. So many people, they just work and they act. Let's take a garage or something. Maybe I'm great at fixing cars and repairing cars. So I get in there, I start a new business, and I'm fixing the cars, and I'm doing my thing. But is that really a business at this point, or are you just being a worker for your business? So as a business, you need to take a step back and you need to think, okay, customer comes in, what do I need to do? How is this going to interact? How am I going to send the reminder? How am I going to get the repeat business? All these complexities is a workflow, and the interaction is a workflow. So encapsulating that workflow in a diagram and managing that workflow is your actual business. It's seeing your business about how it should actually be, rather than just reacting and working, reacting and doing. This is not a business. This is just, it's just working. And yes, you can be successful this way, but are you going to really understand? Are you able to control? Are you able to dictate what occurs when? Continual improvement process. So super, super important. Something, workflow, it gives you a plan for improving. It's great, as I mentioned earlier, it's like, okay, today I only have X amount of resources and I can only perform certain activities. So what do I want to be in the future? I want this to be a artificial intelligent model that can make decisions for me. I want to automate my underwriting. I want to do all these other processes, but today I don't have the data or the knowledge or the resources to execute this. So being able to drive from a workflow just gives you a way to plan for the future. It's like, okay, so today all these activities are going to be human. I'm going to get my underwriter, my sales, my whatever person to do whatever for now. This is stage one. I got to take a step somewhere. Stage two, I'm going to evaluate. I'm going to go back to my workflow. I'm seeing what's working, what's not, where the problems are. Okay, the most important is step B, for example, or whatever that is. Let's say it's underwriter needs to get information. So this takes time, and this is slow, this is error prone. Okay, this has to be the next stage that I need to fix. So maybe this was a human workflow. I'm seeing the errors occurring from here. So this is the next piece that I want to create into a service task and remove the human aspect out of it. So now the beauty is I don't need to inform anyone. I'm just going to remove that part and I'm going to replace it with software. And now I'm going to measure the impact again. Great, this is working. This is not working. But also the improvement goes towards looking at experimental situations. So as we mentioned about the salespeople, okay, we send an email out, we call them, we do these activities in parallel, then the VP of sales gets involved. Okay, this is not working, so we need to try a different approach. Okay, so maybe the first thing is we want to call them before sending the email out. So we're going to start off by that. Once the call is completed, we do some fact finding, we send the introduction out, and maybe this is going to increase our sales. Who knows? But now we're given the power and the tool to be able to perform those experiments. But as I said, we don't need to go back to the sales guys. We don't need to re-educate everyone on something new, because we're driving the process for them. We're telling them what they need to do so they can focus on being the best skilled person they can be. Another thing which I love about the workflow is allocate and improving accountability. So as a manager, I see, if I hire a salesperson, if I hire an underwriter, if I hire a data scientist, what do I want them to be doing? I want them to be doing the job that they're best at, but I don't want them to be thinking for other people. So the workflow, I need to think very clearly and define very clearly what activities I want them to do when. So this is driving them to do activities, driving them to the behavior that they should be. And now we say that this person, let's take the underwriter. Underwriter is now doing their job. They just get information in, and now their specialty is to review this information, report on certain information, report certain metrics, and return the information. This is their job, and this is what they're allocated to do, and this is what they're very good at. But do you really want them to be talking to the sales guy, coming back, getting other information? Do you want them collecting documents? This is an expensive resource, so maybe this is not something that you want them to do. So having the workflow allows you to really try to encapsulate and allocate that responsibility. So why workflow has worked for me? Okay, so developers have focused on building complexity. So this is not state, time, or workflow management, which means now, because we're very specific functional or capabilities or services, whatever you want to call it, focused, now they get to build a whole bunch of complexity. They can build a very complex system for sending out a message, an email. Maybe that's a very basic task, but now they can spend all the time making sure it is the most robust system it is. Or we need a decision. Okay, so before maybe it was just an if-then thing. Now we have the time to say, what do we really want? We can take this to another level of complexity. So we're allowing our developers, because we're saving time worrying about workflow and the states, they're spending a lot more time building out individual complex functions, and they don't need to stress about when this is going to do it. So from a testing point of view, this really contains the development. They're isolating out this development a lot more, so they know what data they need to get, the dependencies, they know what needs to execute, but they don't need to worry too much about the other code which is happening around them. They just need to focus on that unit of work and make sure that it works very well, which is great. More complexity, more service tasks that we can build. And these service tasks become very reusable, because now we say, send an email, let's take a template, let's take a layout. This function now can perform those actions over and over and over again. I mean, that's what code is all about, right? It's about that reuse. But as I said, they're not worrying about when is that code call, how is that code call. All they're knowing is that this is the data it needs to come from, and it needs to do this action. So, as I said here, they're not burdened down with a workflow, they're not burdened down with a lot of micro changes, not burdened down with the timing and the sequencing and parallel activities and all these other things. They're just focusing on building out functionality. Why do the business love it? They can visualize what's going on. They can walk through the process, and we can optimize it. So as we see the data flowing through the workflow, we can visually see that, and we can see where it is, what components at, where it's going slow, where it's going fast, what is working well, what isn't, and then we can talk to the human resources as well. So we can talk to the people and say, okay, what did you what's working, what's confusing, and now we can tweak it. They're driving it. So the business loves it because not only is it visual, now you can explain to any new business person, hey, this is what our business is. This is how it works. And they don't need to go read 100 documents or things like that. They can see it happening in real time. Of course, you're going to take a little bit of time to get used to the workflows, but they can see it, optimize it, discuss it, and refine it over and over again. So they now don't need to, all that information before that was hidden by software and code and a lot of different systems is now all just pulled out and put into these workflows. And it's not just one workflow, it's multiple workflows which are interacting with each other. And the salespeople, they love it. They do not need to learn a process. My salespeople get frustrated with process. They just want to do what they do. They want to get on the phone, they want to send their emails, they want to make sales, they want to close deals, but they don't care about process. They don't want to know that they have to send this document to XYZ, and they don't want to know that they have to do certain activities in different scenarios. They don't want to think about this. They have the capability, but they don't want to think about it. They just want to get these deals closed. So now driving them and just telling them what they need to do and when they need to do it really gives them the freedom to do that. And now they can just focus on, without the burden of all the other interaction hassles, they just focus on delivering and focus on the sales. So that's it for this one. I will be doing a few more of these. These are the some great advantages of doing workflow in your business and adapting it into your IT and to your process thinking. And I'll be doing more of these, and I hope to hear from you soon.